Friday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Jenna Harner on with us. We're going to re-examine the George Pickens question and why it's such a big priority for the Steelers to figure out rather quickly as far as what they want to do. We'll talk about that, take a mailbag question from one of our listeners who called in on Russell Wilson, and give you our picks and predictions for what's going to happen in the Super Bowl. All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app today or use FanDuel.com to get started. More on them later. We got Jenna Harner back on the show. She's, of course, from Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, always great to have you back. It's Super Bowl Friday. Steelers aren't in it, but we still got a lot to discuss, and I think that there's still some big questions, but one of the biggest questions I think the Steelers still have to tackle, and who knows, maybe they've tackled it, they have their plan set for them, we just don't know it yet, but that's what they're going to do with George Pickens, because to me, there's a fork in the road, and there's three ways you can handle it. One, you could sign him to a long-term deal. He's entering the fourth year of his contract, that making him tie in with the team for long-term. Two, there's trading him. There's sending him to another team, trying to get some compensation for that, and then restock your wide receiver room. And then there's the third choice here, where you don't do either. You just keep him on the roster for his fourth year, and then you risk him either holding in, holding out, and that becoming a narrative all going into next season. Jenna, with a guy that's such an important playmaker for this offense, I feel like this is one of the top priorities to Steelers, maybe right after who they figure out their quarterback is. This is the very next thing they need to solidify.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was really interesting when I sat down one-on-one with Steelers president Art Rooney II last week. I asked him, I said, how do you address some of the problems that you have in the receiver room right now, both from a talent standpoint and a maturity standpoint? And he immediately went to George Pickens and was saying that they don't believe that George has reached his ceiling yet. And it's really imperative for him to do that. It's really important for him to get to that high level that they know he can get to. And I think in some of the underlying, unspoken words, I guess you could say, from Art Rooney II, I think he was saying, hey, we know he has another gear to hit in terms of his talent and being consistent throughout the season, but also that maturity part of it too. He has some growing up to do. He has some learning to do. He has some adjusting and adapting to do. I realistically think that what you were saying with your options, I think it's going to be that third option. I think they're going to keep George. They're going to have some serious sit-down conversations with George, and whether he reacts and takes those to heart and says, hey, maybe I do need to change a little bit of my approach and my attitude with things, or if he just keeps going the way that he's going and says, hey, look, I'm a talent. I know what I'm good at. And I know that I bring this to this team. And there's other parts of my game that you can like or not, but that's just part of who he is. I just realistically think he's going to be on this team this season, unless the Steelers say, bear things out there and put some trade, get some trade value and find things out there in that way that is good enough to say, hey, look, we're willing to ship him off here and we're going to get a good return in, and we're going to draft some really solid guys, and we're going to add a guy in free agency.
I think that's listen, the Steelers have to add people to this wide receiver room, regardless of what happens. If they keep George Pickens, if they sign him, they need to add, another playmaker. And listen, they have money in free agency. There's capital to trade for one, and there's guys early in this draft that you can go get. It needs to be done. They didn't do it this past year. Roman Wilson never played, but you need to see if something like that's going to manifest. But I think that's where the big question is can you do that right now? Because George Pickens, you look back at recent history for the Steelers, and not that these were bad, but you had TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Deontay Johnson, all holding in, coming to training camp practices and not showing up, and it being something that lingers over them. And And eventually there was a deal reached with the team. But in all of those situations, it was a foregone conclusion. We would talk with you on this very show saying they're going to sign TJ Watt.
Yeah.
They're going to sign Highsmith and make it. And even Deontay Johnson at the time, like before Deontay Johnson became the problem child that was on 4 teams in one calendar year, like before that happened, he was considered, a potential guy that could become a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. And he was the Steelers' top receiver for a little bit. But this is a situation where now George Pickens has had it out publicly with media members. He has, been that guy. We now have the confirmed report that he was late for the Christmas Day game and things like that have played into things. And there's been questions of his effort. There's also been tongue-in-cheek comments by Steelers leaders about players not committing to practice hard enough, and George Pickens being the target of those tongue-in-cheek comments. And so when you look at that, and right now, we said one of the biggest things this Steelers offense or this Steelers organization wanted to do was to find the leadership nucleus for its offense moving forward. Whether it was Russell Wilson, whether it was Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, whoever it was going to be, they needed that to come to fruition. That hasn't really solidified just yet, especially when you don't know if Russell Wilson's going to stick around. Najee Harris probably isn't going to stick around. So now you're still looking for that. And now you ask yourself, do you want George Pickens to be at the forefront of that conversation, considering how things have been? And that is why I think it is a tough decision. And especially if you don't commit to George Pickens, what is he going to do? Is he going to handle it well? And who knows? Maybe they've already talked about that, and they've like, George, we need to know if you're going to show up. And maybe they've handled that conversation. But to me, that is going to be one of the top priorities for the Steelers, to make sure that is locked down. They know what that is, and they have a plan of attack on how they tackle it this offseason. Because if they go into this next year and this turns into a Le'Veon Bell situation where George Pickens just isn't playing in the regular season, it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And this is one of those, there are reasons that there are very smart, very intelligent people in the Steelers front office handled and tasked with making these decisions, because it is a very calculated one. What are they going to get from George if they say, hey, look, we're going to keep you here, but we're going to see what happens after this year, which is kind of what I do feel like is going to happen. How is he going to react to that? I like to think that they might know, and they might have that some sort of inkling or idea, and have sort of, okay, if he's going to do this, we're going to do this type situation here. But this is one of those, as the Steelers front office, you really have to weigh how much does Pickens' talent matter to you compared to how much some of these antics where, again, he's yelling at fans, the broadcast catches him yelling at fans on the field, and Pat Freiermuth is holding him back. You have obviously the Christmas situation where he's showing up late. And I think from the outside perspective too, a lot of people can look at these things and say, well, okay, how much did that impact it? He's still going out there. He's still making these ridiculous catches. He's still, one-on-one balls that get thrown his way. Usually he comes down with, and he makes these spectacular, miraculous plays that help the Steelers keep drives alive, and has been something that they've struggled with over the last handful of seasons. But there is kind of that, you have to weigh this here. And I guarantee you the Steelers front office is weighing how much they value his talent side of things and what he can produce on the field and how much he does add to this offense versus some of those off the field things, some of those in the locker room things. But it is a very important, because again, like we've been talking about, this feels like such a turning point for this Steelers offense. We know the defense has been so solid. We know the leaders that this defense has in the TJ Watts, the Cam Haywards, the Alex Highsmiths, the Minkah Fitzpatricks. On offense, it was obviously Russ this past season, Pat Freiermuth and Najee, and there's a chance that 2 of those 3 guys can be gone. So you want, and it's tough because sometimes that wide receiver position isn't necessarily that leader, just because of sometimes the embodiment and the persona and personalities there are with receivers. But you need a leadership core on that offensive side of the ball, and you need at least George Pickens to be bought into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where if you're the Steelers, you have to find where you're going with this and make your decision. And you need to make it sooner rather than later, in my opinion, because if you want to turn this into draft picks, if you want to turn this into another player, you need to get yourself set before you hit free agencies, that you're making these judgment calls while you're before you have to go out and sign other guys and build the roster that you set before you even get into the draft class. And I know there's several different camps out there, because I do pay attention to our comments, our call-ins, what people have when it comes. There's some people that think that George Pickens has done nothing wrong, that he's fine, and that you just need to overlook some of the things that he's done, and that because he's such a great player. There's some people that think that you can't win a Super Bowl with a guy like that, and there's people that have even said that on this show and in other places. And so whether you reside in one camp or the other, my opinion is I always give players the chance to grow. I always say, like, hey, you know what? This guy, like all throughout George Pickens' career, I've acknowledged, like, hey, you know what? The block that he didn't throw for Jaylen Warren last year in the Colts game, inexcusable, needed to do it, had to be better. But after that, he changed his attitude. Now, this year again, you saw plays where he wasn't fully committing. He wasn't running the hardest routes. He had times where he was running different routes than what Russell Wilson thought he was going to run, and then not acknowledging that Russell Wilson said that when he did say that. And I think those are things that you're just like, man, like, you'd love it if you could just take one on the chin. Like, even when it's not your fault, take responsibility for something and just be like, hey, let's move forward. Even because when it is your fault, you take responsibility for it. That shows maturity. And that's what the Steelers need right now on the offensive side of the ball, and for the future of this team with some of the young guys that are adding to this team, is that maturity. Will George Pickens be able to do that enough to prove he'll stay around? We'll keep you in touch on that. But we got to get to one of your mailbag questions, talking about the quarterback position and talk about the Super Bowl coming up this Sunday, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Jenna Harner. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, to remind you, the show is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Every January brings a new chapter, and now every February helps you get ready to write all the pages you want to fill in your story. If there's a part of your life that you want to rewrite or a plot twist that you've been craving, why wait? Life isn't about fleeting resolution. It's about taking control and becoming the author of your own story. Think of therapy as your personal editor, helping you craft the life you deserve. It's not just for crisis situations. Therapy can help you develop healthier coping strategies, improve your relationships, and empower you to be the best version of yourself. Whether you're forcing a challenge or you're just looking for personal growth, therapy is a powerful tool to help guide your journey. Whether it's learning how to set boundaries or tackling stress in new ways, therapy can help you develop skills for a better tomorrow. Even if you've never tried therapy, the benefits are clear. Finding someone to talk to and gaining fresh perspectives can make all the difference in how you navigate life's ups and downs. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, as always, we have our call-in line during the offseason. Also, I forgot to say this at the top of the show. This show is being recorded Wednesday early afternoon. So this is our Friday show. I told y'all earlier in the week I'm going on vacation until Tuesday. So I'm going to be working on a lot of things. So a lot of these shows are pre-recorded. If something happens in between now of this Wednesday afternoon show and Friday, and it's not in this show, please understand that is why. I will do my best while on vacation, that if there's something big that happens, to have an emergency episode that's shorter and addresses it. So please understand that moving forward as we continue to discuss things here. But as always, during the offseason, we open up our call-in line, the Locked On Steelers hotline, where you can call 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, give you a question in a minute. We'll try to get your question on the show. And we've gotten a lot of different questions about a lot of different positions, but there's always been questions about the quarterback positions. And Demetrius from North Carolina, Indian Trail, North Carolina, has a pretty strong opinion on this. Demetrius, what do you got to say?
Hey, Chris, my name is Demetrius from Indian Trail, North Carolina. Love the show, man. Listen to it every morning on the way to work. Question: why are we even considering Russell Wilson? Why? It makes no sense. It just makes no sense. All right, man. Thanks.
So Demetrius, very strong there, and thank you for calling in on the Locked On Steelers hotline. We appreciate people who include us in their morning commute. Again, that's 412-223-6644 to get your question on the show. Remember to leave your name, where you're from, give your question in a minute. But Jenna, talking about Russell Wilson here, you know, the why, as far as why they're considering it. We've talked about on this show. You and I have talked about it. I've talked with Mike DeFabo. I've talked with Nick Farrell, Alan Saunders. I think everyone unilaterally is thinking the Steelers right now are most likely going to run with Justin Fields as their option, and should run with Justin Fields as their option. His mobility, his size, his youth. You're not sure about Russell Wilson's age. That's where they've been. But we've also acknowledged they shouldn't close the door altogether on Russell Wilson, because there's always the chance that Justin Fields is just like, you know what? I'm not doing this. And then if you say Russell Wilson, get out of here, and he just locks himself into not coming back to your team, and then Justin Fields turns you down, then you're at square zero. And I think that's why the Steelers are still considering Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and it's been interesting, too, in the way that we've heard a lot of Steelers brass kind of talk about this. When Art Rooney met with print reporters early last week, when he met with myself and other members of the TV media later on in the week, too, the way he was talking, he always seemed to mention Justin first, which could mean something, could mean nothing. You don't know. But it was one of those, to me, I'm like, okay, interesting. And then he would mention Justin, but then he would kind of bring Russ back into the conversation. I had asked him too. I was like, we were talking about like some of the things that are separating them from the teams in the Super Bowl right now. He said, obviously, quarterback was a situation. So I said, hey, look, specifically, what traits are you looking for in your next quarterback? And he mentioned mobility right off the top. And one of those two options between Fields and Wilson is the much more mobile option. However, Art circles back again and says, but there's also really good pocket passers as well. So we're really just trying to keep our options open and find the fit that looks and is best for us. So to me, all of that indicates is that, again, Fields seems to be the front runner in terms of who they want, but is Fields going to want the price? Is Fields going to want to stay in Pittsburgh? Is he going to want to potentially go to a New York Giants, a New York Jets, a different team that is going to offer him more money, more opportunity, a different fresh start? So it's interesting, the options here, but I think the whole reason that they're keeping Russ is, like you mentioned, they're keeping Russ in the conversation. Sorry, I have to preface that. Is that, again, you don't want to, all of a sudden blink and not have either guy. You want to have both at your disposal, have conversations with both of them, seeing, what they want and where they want to go, and then say, hey, look, we're going in this direction, but they don't want to pigeonhole themselves. That's pretty much, it feels like, why they're still keeping Russ in the conversation here.
That's the smart thing to do. You give yourself multiple outs. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. Whatever metaphor you want to use, that's what the Steelers are doing right now. They're making sure that, hey, like you said, because the other factor here is money. Like, I'm sure if they sign Justin Fields, they have a number in mind that they're like, hey, you stick around, you're going to be making 10 a year, 15 a year, whatever it's going to be. And that they are forming their other plans in how to construct the rest of their roster off of who they keep at quarterback and how much they keep them for. And to me, that is the priority that you need to have locked in place, is that you need to make sure that you have that so that the rest of your budget can be set after that. And you can say, okay, salary cap wise, we're going here, we're going there, and this is how we're handling this stuff. That's how, and that's why I say this comes before George Pickens. This comes before who the cornerback that you want to sign. Do you want to sign or draft a defensive tackle? What do you want to add in this roster? But you got to figure out that quarterback question. And so that's why Russell Wilson's an option. And to answer Dimitri's question, I get it. There's a lot of people who are frustrated with Russell Wilson. And towards the end of the season, I said, hey, like, he's not getting it done right now. But there's also no denying that before that 5-game stretch, he absolutely was. He was averaging over 28 points per game. Steelers hadn't done that in years. And I think that there's that acknowledgement, like, hey, they want to keep that as a backup option. Because there's also the question that came out, and we talked about this with Nick Farabaugh on the Wednesday show that came out this week, about the story that came out from Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, a place where I work, that Arthur Smith, in that during that losing streak, limited what Russell Wilson was able to change at the line of scrimmage as a quarterback. And, it's a major question that you're asking. Why in the world would you stop it when it was working for you so well, especially when you scored 44 points against the Bengals? You're averaging 28 points per game, more than 28 points per game, in its first 6 or 7 starts. I get why they are at least leaving that door open. It's not like this is it's not like you want them to have to say, you know what, we'll just settle for, I don't know, Malik Willis or something, a complete wild card that they're not used to, because there's reasons to like both the quarterbacks at some point that they had this past season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is just kind of going to be, okay, where are they going to lean? This is that first domino that has to fall for everything else to fall into place in terms of how much money they're going to be able to spend, where they're going to look to allot that money. And of course, ultimately, what positions do they feel they want to draft high in the draft because of these other limitations here and these other little, puzzle pieces, forever, whatever you want to call it, that have to, fall into place here and have to go specifically in those areas that they need to go in. So to me, again, like we've been talking about, it does feel like Fields seems to be the direction that this team wants to go, but there could be a bunch of wild cards that get thrown in and all of a sudden, they're figuring something else out. They're looking to bring Russ back. Like there are multiple ways this can go, but the most logical one does seem to be bringing Justin Fields back for, maybe a 2-year deal here, seeing what you get out of him next year, seeing if he takes a lot of steps forward and can progress and continue to, have the numbers that he had early in the season when he was playing when Russ was hurt, or if, he is not that answer and the team kind of falls a little bit off the rails, then are you going to draft a guy in next year's draft?
Absolutely. I think that's something that's happening here. We'll keep our eyes on this and keep you up to date with that. But the big game, Super Bowl, Chiefs, Eagles, coming up this Sunday. We're going to get you our thoughts on that game and the key things we're looking for. That next year on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jenna Harner. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you that this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, and endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in a bonus bet for the Super Bowl. Super Bowl odds have opened with the Chiefs as 1.5 point favorites. That's maintained all week long over the Eagles, with the over-under moving down to 48.5 points, where it was at 49.5 points at the time of this recording. The Chiefs are minus 120 on the money line. Eagles are plus 102. And with FanDuel Sportsbook, you're always getting the best opportunity. So download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. You can bet just $5 right now, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets on that $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. We're also brought to you by PrizePicks, the big game being almost here. There's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash while daily fantasy players' projections. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money in cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out. What I love most, fast, safe withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can split a winnings of $1 million from the promos funds. Download the app today, use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jenna Harner. Jenna, we are here at the Super Bowl. It's Super Bowl weekend. It's Chiefs, Eagles. Not what everyone wanted to see. Some people wanted to see some new flavors of things. I predicted it was going to be Ravens and Lions. Neither of them even made it to the conference championship game. But here we are looking at this matchup. And this does feel a little bit different than the last times these two teams played. Back then, the Chiefs were much more of an offensive juggernaut than they are this year. The Eagles were more about their passing game, and they did run the ball a bit, quite a bit, but they did not have the superstar in Saquon Barkley. And so my question to you is, will the Chiefs be able to mitigate Saquon Barkley with their defense, the way they stop the run, or will Saquon Barkley be the X factor for the Eagles in this game that the Chiefs are just going to have to accept and find other ways to win around?
That is the $1 million question. And I think one of the biggest changes in this game versus when these two teams met in the Super Bowl just a few years ago, the Chiefs defense is really solid. I mean, we've just seen, obviously Chris Jones is Chris Jones and he does what he does, but George Karlaftis is having a monster season. Like, the guys up front for the Chiefs are just kicking some major butt. I'm really interested to see how much they limit Saquon, because it seems like Saquon Barkley has just continued to this upward trajectory here where he's just been absolutely unstoppable. And look, the Commanders did not have a spectacular run defense by any means, and we saw what happened that in the NFC Championship there. I think Saquon, how much or how little he gets going is obviously going to basically dictate a whole lot of this game, but I got a good feeling he's going to get his, and he is going to be a man on a mission. You can just see, too, the way that he's been talking in some of the media availabilities early this week. This was a moment he did not anticipate, based on the early portions of his career with New York, was going to happen in this short of a time period. And so it's so interesting because you hear, Nick Sirianni, you hear Jalen Hurts just go on and on and on about what Saquon has done to this team. I think Sirianni's availability on Wednesday this week, he said, he was asked about Saquon's, what he's done to this team, how much he's elevated it. And he's like, all right, how much time you got? There's no... Saquon's addition to this team has just been spectacular. So I'm very excited to see how much he plays a role, but I think it's going to be, I think they're going to have trouble limiting him, trouble stopping him. And I think they're going to be able to limit the Eagles' passing game more than they're going to be able to limit their run game.
And see, that's, to me, is the key for the Chiefs in this game. Can you commit more focus to limiting the Eagles' run game and let your cornerbacks live on islands? Let them be more aggressive with those Eagles wide receivers. Listen, AJ Brown's a bad man. Devontae Smith is a freak of an athlete. And Jalen Hurts can make plays, but you'd rather, if you'd rather the Eagles are going to beat you, you'd rather it be with that, because you can also trust your pass rush to get home in a lot of those situations. And to me, that's the key to limiting the Eagles if you're the Chiefs in this game, because the thing is that the Chiefs, they got some players out there. Jalen Watson and number 1 Trent McDuffie. Those guys are gonna have to win a lot in this game. You've got Shamari Corner at the slot. You've got safeties Justin Reed and Brian Cook. You're hoping that those guys can hold it down, make it so that they're limiting the Eagles from big plays in the passing game. They might hit you with some short plays here and there that might convert some third and shorts, but don't let them break the game open that way. And if you don't let them break the game open that way, and your defensive front is limiting Saquon Barkley, you're not going to take him out of the game entirely, but you can stop him from averaging 5 yards a pop, getting 120 on you and 20K. You don't want that kind of control from the Eagles. And if you're the Eagles, that's what you are trying to do, is that you're trying to set that tone there, and you're trying to make it so that your run game, because here's the other thing, you get that run game going, every second that Saquon Barkley's running the ball, Patrick Mahomes isn't on the field.
Yeah.
And sure, I'm sure the Eagles, they're confident about their defense. Jalen Carter has been great up front. Nolan Smith's been adding to that. Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Slay, Cooper DeJean, they've been adding to that secondary. But you just don't matter who you got. You want to make sure Patrick Mahomes has as few opportunities to beat you as possible. And that, to me, is going to be where the rubber meets the road in this matchup.
Yep. Nope. I can't. I completely agree, because again, Mahomes is going to make those miraculous, insane. He's getting tackled from the legs down and is falling forward and throws a touchdown pass to Travis Kelce, because that's just what he does. So that is how you have to stop him in this league, is keeping the ball out of his hands, because when he has the ball in his hands, especially on the biggest stage like this, he tends to make those massive, insane, how on earth did he do that? What is he doing? He's such a freak of nature, and what an incredible guy we're watching in real time make those plays. So I've also been saying all week, and kind of leading into all the last couple of weeks when we knew these two teams were going to be playing, this is a different Eagles team than it was the last time these two teams met. They're a lot stronger. I think that they have so many more weapons. I mean, obviously their passing game and just the receiver weapons you have Saquon Barkley, as we've been talking about, but their defense has been so solid, and just that defensive front. There's a reason both of these teams are in the Super Bowl. You look at them and they don't really have glaring weaknesses kind of anywhere, but I'm so excited. I can't wait. Can you tell that I'm just like geeking out over here? This is going to be such a fun matchup, and it just for so many reasons. But this, I'm also sick of everybody being like, I'm not watching. You're gonna watch.
Yes, you are.
You're lying to yourself. You're gonna watch.
Absolutely. I'm right with you there. I think another factor into this too about why the Eagles are stronger is that a lot of those guys have had time. A lot of these guys have had time to develop now. Like Jordan Mailata is such a dominant force on the offensive line. Landon Dickerson's grown better. They've had more time to figure things out on offense and on defense. They've replenished that defensive front. Guys have grown over the past couple of years. So to me, that's where I'm looking at this Eagles game and this Eagles game opportunity here is that like this is the culmination of what Andy Weidl was doing with them years ago when he was first building the offensive line and building the defensive line and getting those trench picks and then the Eagles, since Andy Weidl's left them for the Steelers, putting in here. This is the culmination of all the things that they've done to get to that point. And so the question will be, can they get over the hump in doing this against a team that has become the most recent NFL dynasty? And here's the other thing about this, and I think this is the other legacy question here, is if the Chiefs win this game, Jenna, the Chiefs will be the first team since the 70 Steelers to win 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. They're the only franchise in NFL history to do that. It would put them on par with that. And I think it's been interesting to hear Steelers fans be like, yeah, I don't want them, but I don't like Philly either because of the natural Pittsburgh-Philly relationship that you have there. I'm kind of indifferent. I'm kind of just like, you know what? I'm interested to see which story comes out on top, because if you're the Eagles, you're the organization that you've now won 2 in the last 7 Super Bowls, I think it's been, however long it's been since Doug Peterson got them to their last one. But you've been able to do that now, and you're showing like, hey, we've got the core for the future. But if you're the Chiefs and you do it, you're ultimately on top, and you are now one of the greatest dynasties that ever lived in all of sports. Maybe they already are. I just think that's another part of this puzzle that's going to be shaping out this matchup.
No, absolutely. And it's just, obviously, like always, stories are going to be written by what happens here. But man, there are 2 phenomenal ones that can be set to be pen to paper. But I'm also, if the Eagles win, this will be I think you can look at it and say, arguably, the Eagles had one of the best off seasons in history. Again, Saquon Barkley, who's the DB who's the defensive guy I'm forgetting about that they traded for? You're going to say it, and I'm going to be like, yep, that's it. One of their defensive guys, last name ends in a B. That's where my brain is right now.
I was more thinking of Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean as far as draft picks, because they both worked out.
Drafting both Quinyon Mitchell, drafting both guys. It's gonna hit me. I need to look it up because
it was either Zach Bond or Oren Burks.
Zach Bond. Zach
Bond's been great for them.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, you can look at the Eagles and just say, my goodness, this is how you build a team. And this is why this front office is where they are. And then you look at the Chiefs and say, hey, wow, they win. We just witnessed absolute history in the fact that no team has ever won it 3 times in a row. And that's such a testament to who Pat Mahomes is, Andy Reid as a coach, Steve Spagnuolo as a defensive coordinator, that front office with how you do things when you have that quarterback in, the role that he's in. You can build around him in the way that you can.
Absolutely. Let's get to the picks here. Jenna, what's your prediction? Give us your final score prediction, how it gets there. Who wins Super Bowl 59?
I have to do some quick math here, but I was just going with a winner. Again, I can't bet against Patrick Mahomes. And as much as I think the Eagles can be the team to win, I can't go against my gut here and say that the Chiefs aren't going to pull it off and aren't going to do it. It's one of those, in my heart, I want to see the Eagles win, but logically and just in my gut, I think the Chiefs win. I think this is a close game. I think it ends up being like a 3-point, like a 27-24, 31-28 type game. I think both teams are definitely going to get after it. I think both of these defenses are really solid too, but I think both of these offenses have the ability to be so explosive. I think it's going to be back and forth. And I don't think a call is going to be what changes anything. I just think that there's going to be, a 4th down situation that one of the teams converts to keep something going, to keep the ball in their hands, to sustain a drive. And whether they end up coming away with a touchdown off that drive or a field goal, there's going to be some crucial 4th and 2 situation that the Chiefs convert to win or to go on and win. So I'm going with Kansas City, but I would love to see the Eagles win. I really would.
It feels like people have been saying that all along through the playoffs. But it'd be nice if the Bills won. It'd be nice if the Commanders won. It'd be nice if this team won, that team won. And it just hasn't happened. And I think I'm right with you. I think the Chiefs are still in control. I think the problem is that the Chiefs don't have weaknesses where the Eagles have strengths. They don't have an elite run stopping defense, but they have a solid one that's ranked up there in the upper echelon of the NFL. That's there. They don't have a destroy you offensive line, but they have an offensive line that can manage the pressure that the Eagles want to bring. They don't have, the most outstanding secondary, but they have a good enough secondary to limit what the Eagles want to do. And I think that makes it come down to Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. And I'm going to pick Patrick Mahomes that matchup every time. I got the Chiefs winning 27-23, close fashion, like you said, goes down to the wire, but the Eagles fall short and the Chiefs do it yet again. We'll see who's right. We'll see what happens here over the weekend. Jenna, thanks so much for joining us. The people that can find you, follow you, get more of your work.
Well, thank you for having me. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner 11, Blue Sky as well, Jenna Harner, Instagram, Jenna_Harner, and locally and online, if you're not in the Pittsburgh television market, WPXI, channel 11. Got a lot of great Super Bowl content coming for you this week. If you look online, I did a Puppy Bowl story, so that was super fun. Loved that. But yeah, just stay tuned for a lot of awesome content.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you all for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. Back Monday with more on your Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.